So thank you to Regeneration Canada for having us. It's an honor and a privilege to be up here today sharing our story with all of you. Brooks and I, along with our two beautiful children, Sawyer and Piper, own and operate Borderland Agriculture. Our farm is in the extreme southwest corner of Manitoba, with our land bordering both Saskatchewan and North Dakota. Our total land base is around 6,800 acres, and we also have 600 bison. And of that 6,800 acres, about 5,000 acres is put into annual cropland, with the remaining being perennial forage. All that land that we have is spread out over about 30 miles, so it's a pretty vast place. And we're actually a fifth generation farm, and the fourth generation is still really active with us, which we're very fortunate to have. Because we know it isn't the farm that makes the farmer, it's the love, hard work, and character. Life on the farm wouldn't be the same without Brooks's mom and dad. So we also rely a great deal on our team of employees, but they're more than just employees to us. I actually like to refer them as our farmily, which is, I don't know how that translates to French, but anyway, I call them our farmily. So
I came back to the farm 1999. So somewhat ironic, that's when the water cycle seemed to have broke for us and the wet cycle began. My first year back on the farm, we did not seed a single acre that year. This was the result. This is overland flooding due to rainfall. This is not backing up from a river source. Since then, we've had 2 other years of this scenario, zero crop production due to this flooding. So it was during these wet years we started to utilize cover crops, and we started to utilize them essentially as an alternate feed source to feed our bison. We didn't really realize until the years following the improvements that we were noticing happening in the soil. And so it was these fields that were the wettest. We put in cover crops in the following years. Suddenly something was happening there. We didn't understand it, but these fields were the driest in our farm, and we were able to get into them and put them back under production. And it was like we had found one little piece of the puzzle in the system, and that was keeping that living live root always present to improve this water infiltration. And I don't think it was until the 2011 flood, and that's what this photo's from. And you can see on the bottom, it's always green. And it's important to understand this field is very similar elevation. There's not a huge drop in elevation in here. But where it's green in the bottom, a live plant is always present. And so this is when the light bulb went on for me, and you can see where it's always green, it's the improvement in water infiltration that's happened. And this is what started us down our path of regeneration, was this moment here. And ultimately, it was regeneration by mimicking nature and trying to keep that live plant always present.
And realizing that we needed to get the water in the soil rather than trying to find a way to drain it. So what we did was we made Regenerate the vision statement for our farm. And everything we would do on our farm would work towards this vision. We would regenerate our soil, we would regenerate our business, and we would regenerate agriculture by spreading the word. So now we live by the 5 principles of soil health. No tillage, keep your soil covered, embrace plant diversity, maintain a living plant root, and integrate livestock wherever possible. So our mission statement for the farm is to convert the energy of the sun into nutrient-dense bison. So you can see here we have some flavorful, lean, nutritious red meat. And we all know, we've heard that Wednesday is hump day, so you should grab some bison on hump day and enjoy it.
You will not regret it. So, and what better way to mimic nature than to use nature's best adapted grazer, the bison? So these animals are very suited to our harsh Canadian climates, and they offer so many advantages in our grazing system. So we've been working hard on what we've called our Graze 365 program. After listening to Joel's presentation yesterday, I understand now maybe we need to rethink that, and it's now our Prune 365 program. So definitely got me thinking yesterday. We feel our prairie landscape where we're located, it has so much potential to get livestock out of the yards and onto the landscape. 20 years ago, we developed our first rotational grazing system. This is how we started. And we thought we were doing really good things. We set up a rotational system. We moved the animals every couple of weeks. For the first period of a few years, we saw vast improvements in our grass production, and our soil was really improving. We thought we were doing really great things, but after a few years, we hit a solid plateau, and we were not improving. We realized we needed to find ways to intensify our grazing. We needed to break it down into smaller paddocks and increase the duration of our moves. Ultimately, what we were doing was we were rotationally grazing, but we were rotationally overgrazing. So we broke it down into smaller paddocks, and we started to utilize this through things like temporary fencing. And when we started to do this, bison producers told me, this will not work, you will fail. Bison will not respond to temporary fencing. They need to have their space. You need to just let them out into a field and let them go. We took this as a different approach and thought about this in a different way. We were determined we were going to find a way to make it work. We needed to step back. We needed to observe these animals, figure out what we had to do to make this system work, to get our stocking density to a rate where we could see that kind of trample effect and the plant utilization that we needed to improve our system. And it actually, in the end, once we stepped back and observed, and we took our time, after many failures, it got to be so easy that even a 7-year-old can do it. So now we've got our kids out there doing it with us, and I know maybe you can't see the photo, it's so easy for him, he's even in his flip-flops, he doesn't like boots. So for us, ultimately what it meant was training these animals. Stepping back, and we had to not get ourselves too far forward, we had to go to a 2-strand temporary system. And yes, it meant more work, but ultimately the end result was to get to a single strand, and that was how we were going to get there. And we could make it fun at the same time. We found visual barriers helped a lot, so hanging these beer cans on an electric fence trained them, because they see these things shining in the sun, they go up there to find out what it is, and they would put their nose on it, and all of a sudden they got a shock from the fence, they're starting to get trained to it. And this kind of got to be fun at the same time because we needed a lot of beer cans, and there's only one way to get that, so...
And our family likes beer, and it gets hot in Manitoba in the summer.
Ultimately, what it came down to was it was not about training the bison. It was training ourselves.
Yeah, ourselves.
Thinking differently. And we started to utilize full season cover crops with targeted periods where we're going to graze these, but also having specific goals in mind with these cover crops and what kind of a resource we were trying to address in these certain fields. So we started to utilize these in twofold. One, to build our soil health. So we're using these as a biological primer in land we're transitioning from conventional farming. So this is kind of our stepping point to jumpstart this regenerative system. But also we're utilizing them in our livestock management at peak times of the year when we know our nutrition needs are the highest, such as breeding time and things like that. And so we kind of planned these out, but what we've learned over the years is you can't just throw on cover crops and expect miracles are going to happen. It has to be a total systems thought process and change, because if you don't think it through and use the right species or take the right approach with it, it just, sometimes it doesn't work. You need to really think this through. It's not that simple.
And you can't do what your neighbor's doing because that's not maybe your goal, and it might not work for you.
So we set up intensive grazing paddocks with these cover crops with the goal in mind to get that biological activity jump started. And now we're using that same cover crop I showed a few pictures ago, and now we've got these animals down to a single strand of fence, and we've got as intensive as we can get with them to this point. And we're getting that kind of trample effect we need out of that cover crop and completely covering the soil and getting the nutrients spread where they need to be, and trying to accomplish all those goals we had in mind. And as we move through the system, we're nearing the end of this field. This is as dense as we've got our stocking density yet with bison. These are 90 bison cow-calf pairs on about 2 acres for a day. The goal was a day. It turned out to be a day and a half, just the way things worked out. We call it adaptive grazing because things change on the fly. So what we learned was these are a wild animal. These are not cattle. We learned a lot from the cattle industry, but these are a wild animal. We had to approach this a little differently. This is the density we got to that the animals were comfortable, but also the people felt safe and comfortable. And so we're learning about this. We have ideas of ways we can get our density even higher yet, but as of now, this is where we've got ourselves to. And we're getting really good results with this density. And what we found happening, bison are very herd-oriented animal, as we heard in some of the talks yesterday. And it is true, and when they come to water, they want to come all at once as a herd. And on the hot summer days, where we get some days over 40 degrees, they would come to water all as one, and they would stay there for the day. And they would linger around the water, and this is their breeding time of year. And so we don't want them lingering around the water, swatting off flies and mucking in the mud. We want them out grazing and trying to get some nutrients into them. So what we found when we started doing this system is we actually changed the grazing patterns of these animals and how they're coming to water. And we're now seeing them wanting to be out in the field grazing. And they're coming to water in small groups. And you can see here where there's small groups breaking away from the herd. And they're going to water and then going immediately back. And they're out there grazing and doing what they're supposed to do. And it's hard to see in this photo, but in that alleyway where they're leading to water, they're actually crossing paths, going different directions. And that's completely contradictory to what bison naturally would want to be doing when they go for water. So a really interesting observation. And this was a first-year transition field, remember, from conventional ag, high-input cropland. And the dung beetles were present already, first year, and we're starting to see insect activity happening, and the benefits are there. And it's so amazing how fast these changes can happen. And the manure is starting to cycle. Within weeks, the grass is growing back through that manure. These dung beetles have really helped to break the process of decomposition, and the grass is growing through it.
Brooks is obsessed with manure, just so you know. He likes to dig in it, and he calls it his cowpyology.
It's very scientific. So earthworms were present everywhere in this field after a single year transition. Yes, we had earthworms before, but every spade I would dig in the ground, I would find 7 earthworms in this field. So they were just abundant. And when I dig it up, not only that, but the soil aggregation was in place, and you could see the soil structure holding together. And I walked to a neighbor field who was a long-term zero-till farmer, similar to us with high input usage in the past, who had a canola field right across the road. So I walked 200 feet into his canola field, and I dug and dug and dug, and I did not find a single earthworm. It was 200 feet away. And when I would dig that soil up, I'd put it in my hands, and it would fall apart to powder. And so I just could not believe the physical observation of how fast these transitions are happening. And we dig down to the subsoil, and we can see those earthworm channels all the way down into that subsoil. And this soil thermometer shows the same results. Like the benefits of having these covers in our system, protecting that soil and preserving microbial activity. We know what's going to happen to them when that thermometer hits 140 degrees. And so in this Graze 365 program, after we've used that cover as biological primer, we're back into our second round of perennial grazing. So we're going to go through those perennial pastures a second time. And then we're back to a cover crop again in the late fall, winter months. And we're gonna go through that to kind of carry us into winter as much as possible. These are highly diverse mixes. Some of these we're using, this is a 23 species mixture. We're trying to keep it as diverse as possible to try to get that activity going. And then integrating these livestock into our annual crop system is important. And we utilize a lot of corn grazing for us. It really works well, but it's not just corn grazing. We include covers in that corn. You can see it green in the bottom where we have some hairy vetch growing in there. For us, it's the bottom line and having to make some money while we do this as well. And we aren't in a high yielding corn area in our where we are. $400 to $500 an acre gross revenue is about what we can expect to get off of a corn crop. But if we add our bison in there, it calculates out to nearly $100 an acre in revenue. So we're adding almost, we're looking at 20% increase in our profitability when we integrate these systems and we try to utilize that as much as possible. And we also use whole standing corn. This may be one of the most profitable ones we can do. Not combining the corn, but just grazing the whole thing at certain times. We prefer this with our yearling animals, and this is how we're getting our animals to our market finish. And so our bison yearlings will go into a whole standing cornfield like this, and they'll come directly off of it right into the truck and to the processing plant. So this is how we're keeping our animals out of a feedlot, grazing them all year round, and directly marketed that way.
And happy. They're happy.
Absolutely. And bison are natural winter grazers. So we want to take advantage of this as much as possible. These animals would far rather be out there in minus 30 weather, which this day was minus 30 in January 3 years ago. And they're utilizing our system, but they're also happy doing it. And we want them to work for us. We don't want to be out there working for them all winter long. So winter's easier on us in our livestock system. We just let them out for the winter and they do the work. It's kind of backwards maybe the way you think, but our grain farm is what keeps us busy in the winter. But we leave the calves out there. The calves are doing what they're supposed to be doing too. We leave them on all winter with these cows. And they're learning to do what bison are supposed to do from those mums, so they'll work for us in our system. And this is what they're grazing out there, is green underneath all that snow.
So although our mission is to produce nutrient-dense food, or nutrient-dense bison, and food, I guess, we also have those 5,000 acres of cropland that we want to grow in a regenerative system as well. Because, you know, a lot of people, including Brooks, likes to have a bun with his bison burger. So we need to find ways to farm just crop as well.
We need to grow grain in these systems as well,
grain,
right?
sorry.
So, yeah,
So what we do is we do it through intercropping.
Yeah, and here's an example. We grow peas and we grow canola. Canola is a very important crop in the prairies. We do it differently. We seed them together. We call it peola. So these root interactions form early. You know, the nitrogen's providing the host for the rhizobium bacteria, but also for the mycorrhizal fungi, which we've learned how important that is. In canola, interesting, which is such an important crop in the prairies, is not a host for mycorrhizal fungi. And so that's one of these things we need to keep some other crops in these systems to bridge that gap. So intercropping them keeps the way of that happening. But the canola also supports the peas. It acts as a trellis and keeps holding them up off the ground, which supports it for easier harvest. And in this test strip in the middle is a straight pea test strip. And where you see the bare soil starting to show up, that's not misses with the seeder. That's where the peas are starting to lodge and fall down. And so the canola is holding them up off the ground, which made our harvest much easier. Some other intercrops we do, just to go through fairly fast here. This is faba beans, wheat, and canola. All three seeded together, harvested together. Some other ones we do flax and lentils, oats and peas, many more. This is an example of our grain separating operation. We harvest these all together. Here we're doing oats and peas. And it looks really busy, but one guy can run all this. It's actually pretty simple. We're trying to add value to the farm as we're doing this. So we're cleaning our seed for next year, and some is for seed sales. So we got clean pea seed going out one way. Oats and peas are going into this grain cleaner right here. At the same time as we're cleaning the peas, this setup is actually cleaning oat seed at the same time. So we're doing two operations in once, getting our oat seed and our peas. All of our dockage is being saved on the farm, going into a feeder directly out to the pasture where the bison will utilize it instead of giving it away to the elevator system. And then we've got, these are just clean of oats, basically clean oats. These are as well going out to the, well, they're going to end up here in Cheerios. We utilize a lot of relay crops as well. So in sunflower harvest, we have clover. This is a blend of 3 clovers growing under our sunflowers. Hairy vetch and our corn is one of my favorites. And these are key ones that we utilize in our winter grazing after our harvest.
So these are a list of all the crops that we grew the last 2 years. And so last year we actually had 12 different crops. But we feel like the most important thing that we did plant last year was a fence post. And we planted a lot of those. Because having a fence around every acre we own gives us that flexibility in our system to not just harvest with our mechanical harvester, but also with our 4-legged bioharvesters.
And after years of some of these things working in our system, we see results like this. And this is a corn crop grown with years of feeding the soil, not feeding the plant, feeding the soil. So all 5 of these principles for years. And this corn is grown with 0 added fertility. And, you know, but we want to confirm our results. So we do test strips. So we have on the left corn with 0 added fertility, and on the right we added 110 pounds of nitrogen. And when we took the combine into the field, we saw no visual difference, but the combine really told the story to us. And what we actually saw happen was 8 bushels per acre less where we applied 110 pounds of nitrogen. So interestingly enough, it raises more questions than answers, but what is happening in these systems when we start to put those inputs back in once the soil is actually functioning? And we keep the soil aroundies challenge fun and educational for our team. The kids really love this thing. We buried the underwear for 60 days to measure microbial activity in the soil. When we dug these things up, these kids are just amazed. Okay, my 10-year-old godson Clay, he's helping us, and he says, "What eats the underwear? Is it the earthworms?" And my 7-year-old son Sawyer, he really listens. He knows what he's talking about. He says, "No, Clay, it's the microbes." So these kids get it at a young age, and it's so important to us that they understand. And this is why we do it. You know, it's really for them. And we go back to our farm tour. We had a farm tour later that year, and we wanted to go back to that spot where the underwear were decomposed the most. After 60 days, there's nothing left but an elastic band. And we did a soil pit. We did some water infiltration tests. And we measured water infiltration at 6-inch rainfall in under 5 minutes. It was completely infiltrating. And that's the number one message we want to give to farmers in our area. So we all know bison roam the plains once in large numbers, and yes, it looked different than this. We had maybe 30 million bison roaming around the prairies, and 30 million, sorry. They ultimately their numbers dwindled to under 1,000, and it was a few conservation-minded ranchers that really saved this species from extinction and brought us back to where we are today with them. The sad thing is I feel agriculture today is headed down a similar path. And I look at our farmland locally, and all of our farmland in our area was planted by my great-grandparents and others in the area in the 30s and 40s with these beautiful shelter belts. They were put there for a reason. And today I see on neighboring fields they're disappearing, and they're disappearing fast. And within a couple of years, that same field looks like this. And it's completely void of all types of life, and this is a result of our monocrop agriculture. And the good news story is we have a solution, and it is regenerative agriculture. This wildlife does return to our land. It finds a home on our fields. And it's okay to take some crop production out of annual crop production, put it into permanent pollinator habitat in strategic places around our farm, understanding it's going to benefit the whole system on our farm, and we're going to be further ahead in the end.
So this is a video we took, I think, January sometime. And it really shows a really pretty important message. You can see the moose are just hanging out, and there's bison grazing, and we basically need to find a way to grow our food in such a way that we're feeding all aspects of life. And if we're going to graze or prune bison 365 days a year, then it isn't hard to provide a home for everyone else as well. And we believe that that life starts from the soil up. Like it starts with healthy, rich soil, rich in soil life, or rich in microbial life, and then it just builds up from there, like through the insects and the birds, the rabbits, the mice, the moose, the deer, and finally back through the predators and scavengers. We truly believe that we can find a way for this ecological system to coexist in today's agriculture. It's basically just spreading that message that it works and it needs to be done.
I wish this video would capture the full essence of the life that's in this field. You can only see so much from a $1,000 drone, but we aren't deer farmers. But they're finding a home at our place. I guess that is our multi-species grazing right now. We estimate over 500 deer in this field. I can't capture it all, but it's also the other wildlife that's present. Like this field is full of upland birds, like the pheasants and the grouse and the partridge, and then the eagles are flying around. There's coyotes out there that are harvesting the sick deer, and
the ravens.
It's just amazing the life in January that we see on this compared to that previous picture I showed you, where the trees disappeared and we haven't seen an animal out there all winter.
Right. So you guys probably all know of Gabe Brown. He's a mentor of ours as well, and he shares this quote that he heard from Don Campbell that really changed his life, and we feel that it's very important to send this message that he is trying to get across, and it's, if you want to make small changes, change the way you do things, but if you want to make major changes, change the way you see things. There needs to be a change in our agricultural system, and there is reason for change, and that time is right now. Agriculture and agroforestry is basically the only two industries that are able to sequester carbon and have a positive impact on climate change. We're the only ones. We need to spread this message. It needs to be taught and spread.
Thank you.
Yeah.